How often have I said to you that once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth?
That is a quote from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's second Sherlock Holmes novel, The Sign of the Four. It certainly seems to fit the man's seductive style, but I'm pretty sure that when Doyle wrote it, he wasn't thinking about robot dinosaurs! This was a long time coming. The Asylum is one of the worst movie production companies around, surviving only because they put almost no production value into their movies and they have a very lucrative customer base. Nearsighted grandmothers who confuse their movies for something better. Their movies have been dubbed mockbusters for stealing the ideas from bigger, better movies and are pretty much what the Asylum is known for. Recently, the Asylum has found some success in the ridiculous Sharknado series, but even that jumped the shark before the first movie was even over. Their crews put almost no effort into their work, and yet somehow, the company is allowed to survive, parasitically sucking the marrow from vastly more creative people. Personally, I hate them because they technically have the first adaptation of the John Carter of Mars series called A Princess of Mars, which is a feat that people far better than them have been trying to do for well over 50 years. But we're not here to see that. Instead, we're talking about what they did to the immortal Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is easily one of the most famous, most successful, and most imitated characters of all time. People have been idolizing him ever since he came out in 1887, when he first appeared in the novel A Study in Scarlet. Over the course of his career, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle would write 56 short stories and 4 novels involving the titular detective. Since then, Sherlock Holmes has been seen in movies, cartoons, books, comics, and even crude remarks. He's been revived in more movies than I care to count, and a dumb cartoon that I admit I kinda liked as a kid. Sherlock Holmes was so popular that when Doyle killed him off in a battle against his greatest enemy, Professor Moriarty, fans around the world were outraged and demanded that Doyle bring Holmes back to life. Sherlock's final adventure was in 1893 in the story The Adventure of the Final Problem. However, people were so upset by this that over 20,000 of them canceled their subscription to The Strand, the magazine that published Holmes' adventures. Doyle brought Holmes back initially in 1901's Hound of the Baskervilles, stating it took place before Holmes' supposed death, then brought the detective back for real in The Adventure of the Empty House in 1903. Sherlock Holmes now survives as an icon, as well as through the modern adaptation of Sherlock, starring Benedict Cumberbatch, and in many ways as Batman. Seriously, Batman is like Sherlock Holmes but with more money, a costume, and dead parents. Whatever the case, Sherlock Holmes has earned his immortal place in fiction, and everyone who loves a good detective story should check him out. Except for the Asylum, who ruin everything they touch. So let's sleuth our way through the Asylum's Sherlock Holmes. So we start our movie almost 50 years after Holmes supposedly died. Interesting choice. World War II is coming, and the Nazis are bombing London. And while this is going on, Old Man Watson is lamenting the raid.
This is the second time I've watched London burn.
Oh, and I'm gonna say this now to get it out of the way. The effects in this movie are horrible. Absolutely nothing works with them. I've seen amateur YouTubers with no real funding or studio backing massively outperform what this movie does. So there. I just saved you from 5 hours of complaining about the same thing over and over. Spend your newfound time wisely.
Right there. I'll say goodnight now.
Hi? Did you suddenly forget that another country is blowing up your city? There's being aloof, and then there's caring so little that the Borg would tell you to show some emotion. God damn it, how far are we into this movie? Oh god. This was a mistake.
Wait, please. How are you taking dictation, Miss Hudson?
So Watson has one more story to tell, and there's no better time than when he's backlit by St. Paul's Cathedral burning. In the Sherlock Holmes stories, Watson was the narrator and told their adventures from his perspective, but this one was the only adventure he never wrote down. probably because it was so stupid that no one would believe him.
He felt the public was not ready to hear this.
And that's despite ample evidence to the contrary, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
Dr. Watson, who is he?
The movie gives us the opening credits, and normally I wouldn't bother with this, but they actually did a decent job setting this up, considering who we're dealing with. The music isn't bad, and while the set pieces are low grade, they could certainly look worse. Of course, it helps that my expectations are so low that they're ordering tea in China. Watson's story picks up in the English Channel, 1882, just a few years after he and Sherlock met. A group of sailors are coming into port when the lookout thinks he sees something and sounds the alarm.
Something coming towards us. No! He's coming towards us! No!
Those are waves, Bob.
What was it?
It's nothing!
Cole blimey, what was the captain thinking putting a schizophrenic on lookout? But the lookout was right to fret, because in a classic action trope, they get attacked. What the hell's gonna attack them in the English Channel, a kraken? I was fucking kidding! Sailors are pulled from the deck, and it's all the captain can do to keep his men from being taken under. Skipping to the next day, we see a young Dr. Watson performing an autopsy. Watson is played by Gareth David Lloyd, or as I call him, Discount Chris Pratt. He doesn't get far though, until our hero of the evening stops by.
Ah, there you are. Holmes! You scared the life out of me.
And here we have the brilliant Sherlock Holmes, played by Ben Sider in his film debut. And he's really not the right guy for this part. Look, I don't want to be too harsh on the guy because it feels like he's trying, but this is an Asylum film. Nothing he does will make the movie look good. Holmes was a sharp talker and had a very commanding presence, something which would be better presented through a deeper voice. You'll notice that almost every other incarnation of Sherlock Holmes got that right.
I'm not a psychopath, Anderson. I'm a high-functioning sociopath. Do your research. You need to bring Rachel in. You need to question her. I need to question her.
This robbery has been carefully planned over months, even years, by a master criminal.
And the bat motif, most surely inspired by some childhood trauma. The masked bat, perhaps?
Actually, it's Batman.
I have a letter from Scotland Yard. It seems a treasury ship has gone down in the Channel, under most mysterious circumstances.
Sider's delivery is weak and quiet, like if the meek kid in class was handed the part just because he had the right look for it. Did the director really not know what he was working with, or was he literally asleep on the job? To speed things up, Holmes finishes Watson's autopsy through observation, noting that the man on the table was most likely a fishmonger who ate too much fish and thus succumbed to mercurial poisoning.
Sometimes you make me wonder why I spent 7 years in medical school.
Knowing you, I suspect it had something to do with impressing a woman.
After a short train ride, Holmes and Watson arrive at a hospital and greet Inspector Lestrade, who made the occasional appearance in Holmes' adventures. Lestrade tells Holmes about the ship attack in the Channel and explains that there was only one survivor, who now speaks about a sea monster that attacked him.
But it pulled the ship down. All the way down. Into the water. And all my mates, every one of them, drowned! Or crushed by the monster! Ah!
Great audio quality there, by the way. I think you're blowing out your boom mic. Sherlock, being uncharacteristically open-minded, asks to see the remains of the ship, so Lestrade leads them, Watson, and some fourth guy to a cliff.
Well, I can't see it.
That is why I requested for Lees to bring a great deal of strong rope for our excursion today. If one were harnessed and lowered down, one should get a view of the ship.
Question: why didn't you rent a boat? Instead of going with a much safer and far easier option that would allow everyone a chance to examine the boat, as Holmes likes to educate Watson on proper observation techniques, the good doctor just scales down the cliffside to some overly dramatic music. Okay, I'm skipping through a lot of footage here, but the movie dicks around for the next 5 minutes. I'm not kidding, 5 minutes while Watson descends the cliff. If that wasn't bad enough, the single pipe they're hanging Watson from changes from this basic pipe to what is clearly rebar. Midway down the cliff, Watson sees someone drown, then reports back to Holmes.
Well, what did you see down there?
And sad to say, but he's right. The movie just carries on and never refers to him again. My question is, then why the hell did you include it in the movie? Did we seriously just watch 5 straight minutes of filler in a 90-minute film? Also, we never got to see one hint of the ship, so nearly this entire scene was a complete waste of time. The only thing that happens is Lestrade talks to Holmes, offering condolences about the detective's brother, who was paralyzed on duty 7 years ago. And considering that scene happened on the way to the clip, the last 5 minutes look even more meaningless. Moving on, we see a teenager wandering the streets of London, looking for...
Are you, as if I wanted to, Are you Miss... Pinchcock?
Wow. Subtle. They head down the alley so they can have some fun together when... the stupidest thing imaginable happens.
Never seen one before, Nug.
I don't even know where to start with this. A dinosaur? In the middle of town? And can someone tell me what this is supposed to be? I want to say this is a miniature T-Rex, except the head is too thin, the proportions are wrong, and oh yeah, the T-Rex wasn't discovered until 1902, 20 years after this movie is set. The dinosaur kills the teenager, for some reason, then walks away somewhere. I think Rex just wanted to find a better way to scare the other toys.
How you doing, Rex?
Were you scared? Tell me honestly.
The attack makes the morning paper, which we find Watson reading at breakfast with Holmes.
Come, Watson. What's in the news?
Only Lestrade seeking publicity.
Wait. What did that headline say? Italian air raid on Malta. That's a prop newspaper from a World War II set! God damn it, the movie couldn't even get that right! And that's a map on the back showing the battle lines in France. Sherlock, you know what's coming! You have a chance to stop Hitler! For God's sake, man, take it!
Miss Fassbinder witnessed the fatal attack on Mr. John Poole, a Gresham Street bank teller, by a creature with glowing eyes and phosphorus breath. This is preposterous.
Now, I probably don't have to explain this to my readers in the audience, but this sort of thing is extremely far removed from anything Holmes would ever actually encounter. He went after common criminals, like thieves, con artists, and the occasional murderer. He never went after the supernatural thinking it could be possible, he went after them to prove they were absurd.
So you still don't believe in monsters?
The only monsters I believe in look very much like you or I.
Right now, Watson is giving a more faithful portrayal of Sherlock than the guy actually playing Sherlock. So Holmes and Watson take a walk out in a nearby park when they come across a fountain putting out less water than usual.
Seems weaker than usual. Come on, Holmes. Not everything's a clue.
But their pleasant walk is turned into a dash for survival when they come across a large footprint and hear a loud rustling in the bushes. But even after a 2-minute chase scene, in which our heroes run away from rustling bushes, they still can't get away from their pursuer.
Starting to believe?
I believe we should run!
Oh my god! Did that thing just hop? Okay, so even though our heroes know that this might be the supposed monster from the paper, Watson just chases after it while Sherlock stays back to look for clues. Watson does his best to keep up with the dinosaur and comes across a seemingly abandoned village. Oh, come on, do you see any holes in the wall? Do you think that thing just used the front door? Watson steps inside and sees... nothing, just a broken old shack and a leaking pipe. But someone else sees him.
Don't move.
Oh, Lestrade. Lestrade, it's me. Watson.
Calling it now, Lestrade's the bad guy. Sherlock wanders in a moment later to remind Lestrade that Watson is harmless, and then the investigation begins.
What did this?
Well, you wouldn't
We
believe
were
it, actually.
wondering the same ourselves. We were taking our early morning constitutional when we heard a great ruckus and came to investigate.
Somehow, this satisfies Lestrade for now, and he leaves.
Why didn't you tell him
Tell him what?
what we saw?
Well, that's rich coming from you, Mr. I didn't see a dead guy in the water.
Curious. Do you notice what's missing, Watson?
I don't know, maybe some equipment, a bit of the floor, the rest of that pipe, part of the ceiling. What do you want, Holmes? Sherlock explains that there used to be a water pump inside this shack, which explains the leaking water pipe and the half-hearted fountain that they came across before. My question is, are we supposed to believe that the dinosaur stole this water pump? I mean, why else would he have been in this area? And if he did steal it, how? Because there's a fundamental problem in making a T-Rex a thief. Well, Sherlock manages to come across a clue, a small strip of something, and like any good forensic scientist, studies it at home by handling it as much as possible. Meanwhile, Watson is at his clinic when he meets this man in a wheelchair and this lady who bought her shoulders from the World of Warcraft.
Hands cold as ice.
Careful, Watson. If you piss her off, she might cast Frostbolt on you.
I need to secure my medications.
Of course, let's have a look. Corticosteroids, morphine. These are very powerful medications.
Then either share them or stop the movie! Watson heads into town, where he stops to chat to a homeless man.
Stingy bastard. I beg your pardon. Oh, Watson, I can still delude you.
Yeah, so Sherlock was adept at disguises, but I don't recall him ever doing it in such a cringy way. Sherlock then takes the extra clothes off and drapes them over a homeless man without even so much as a hello. Come to scenic London. Dress the homeless like they're lifeless mannequins. They won't mind, they're not really people. But Sherlock came here for more than playing dress up with complete strangers. He and Watson are investigating another clue at a local factory.
So what's this place? Copper factory. These cables are used for telegraph and telephone wire.
Sherlock and Watson spend a few hours in the factory waiting for their thief when they hear something late at night. And this scene has such a slew of stupidity that I have to slow it down just to get all the points in. Our heroes see a blur and Sherlock takes off running while Watson fires at the back of his head. The dinosaur then somehow sneaks around the next wall and headbutts Sherlock into the corner. Watson continues to run forward, but the dinosaur somehow teleports onto a catwalk overhead. Between the god-tier agility and the nat 20s and all the stealth checks, I'm pretty sure this dinosaur is a ninja. I mean, the dinosaur's steps were so loud that they echoed in the woods, but now he isn't making a sound? What the hell? Watson then fires at the catwalk, somehow getting 7 shots out of a 6-round revolver. But that's okay, he probably keeps 1 round in the chamber. The dinosaur throws some glass or something down at Watson, but Sherlock tackles his friend, taking the brunt of it. That is a lot of failure to fit into 30 seconds. Watson leads Sherlock home and props his leg up. Sherlock is bleeding badly, but Watson is able to use a bottle of alcohol to clean the wound by pouring it on Sherlock's pants.
Sometimes you make me wonder why I spent 7 years of medical school.
Watson then takes his
7 years of medical school
by injecting a syringe of morphine directly into Sherlock's kneecap, which takes effect immediately. Now I bet you're thinking there's no way this could get any worse, but you're wrong. You are dead wrong. Come back next time to see just how low a company like the Asylum can really sink.